Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to turn my grid back on. So I'm going to go to this adaptive grid medium. Actually, let's go smaller than that. Narrow. Now we're back to where we were. So we're going to talk about the horizontal element here. Okay, so going across this way, what are we saying? First, let's talk about that thing I just did. So if I go here, I have two choices for my grid. I have adaptive grid and fixed grid. You probably have this in your software too. So if I say fixed grid and I say 1 bar, what that means is we're going to see every bar. Each one of these blocks is now 1 bar. If I zoom way in, we're looking at 1 bar from dark line to dark line. I'm seeing beats here, but it's going to snap me to every bar, right? It's only going to let me do things on the bar here. Okay? So if I want this drum beat to start on beat 2, I can't do it. I can only start on this bar or this bar. Okay, so it's a little prohibitive. So let's say half note. Okay, now we're slicing the bar in half. Now I can start on beat 3 of the bar, which is halfway. So if we look here, well, let's go all the way back to the beginning so that it's a little more obvious. There we go. Okay, here's bar 1. Okay, here's bar 2, right? So there's a halfway point. So that's why we said half. Half, because I've sliced the bar in half. I could say quarter. Now I've sliced the bar into quarters, and I can start anything on a quarter note. Now, important that no matter how far I zoom in here, I'm only going to be able to put things on the quarter note. If I drop something right here, it doesn't even move. It's either there or there, right? Or there. I can't get anywhere in between because that's what my grid is doing, no matter how far I'm zoomed in. Okay, so I can make it smaller and smaller. But if I go to this adaptive grid setting, what this means is what I'm going to snap to depends on how far I'm zoomed in. So let's go to narrow. Okay, so now I'm looking at actually 30-second notes. Let's zoom out a little bit. Okay, now I'm looking at 16th notes. So I can snap to 16th notes. Each one of these is a 16th note. Let's zoom out a little bit more. Okay, now I'm all the way back looking at half notes again. Okay, so I can get on a half note, I can get on another half note. I can't get anywhere in between, but if I wanted to get more in between these two spots, I could zoom in just a tiny bit. Now I'm looking at quarter notes. Okay, if I wanted to get in between these two quarter notes, I could zoom in a little bit more. There we go. Now I'm looking at 16th or 8th notes. Okay, if I wanted to get in between these two spots, zoom in a little bit more. Boop. There we go. Now I'm looking at 16th notes. If I wanted to get in between these two, zoom in a little bit more. Now I'm looking at 30-second notes, and I can keep going and going and going and going and going. Okay, now I'm looking at 2048th notes. Okay, so incredibly, incredibly small. So in this adaptive mode, your grid is dependent on what you're zoomed into. Okay. Now, not all programs do this next thing, but in Ableton, you can always tell how far you're zoomed in by looking in the lower right corner right there. It says 8th. I'm looking at 8th notes now. Each of these boxes is an 8th note. If I zoom in a little farther, now I'm looking at 16th notes. Farther, 30-second notes. I go in. Okay, here's 16,384th notes. Pretty quick. Cool. So that's an important element of the grid. I almost always, for my purposes, keep this on adaptive grid narrow. Now, another important element on the horizontal line of our grid is that we start if we have a clip that's beat based, right? So in this audio file, there are It's a beat, right? Here's what it sounds right? So the first spot of the clip right here is on a downbeat. And if I set that right, then the rest of the clip is going to be in time. Okay? Here's another downbeat, because that's a whole note. A whole number, I should say. And it's right on it, right? It's lined up. So if everything lines up right, our drum loop here is going to be perfectly on the beat, assuming it's recorded or adjusted to fit into the beat that we have. We'll talk more about that later. We can stretch something to fit our tempo. Ableton does that automatically for you. Other programs do it automatically for you. There are some settings behind it. We'll talk more about that later. But it's important to know that if my downbeat is lined up right, the rest of the beat will be lined up right. Now we're going to go into, in a minute, we're going to go into making a beat from scratch, in which case we'll just have smaller things like this. Like here's a kick, here's a snare, and we can put a snare again and again, and then our kick again. And with these, we just need to manually line them up. So we'll talk more about that in a minute. Last thing about this horizontal layer is the numbering. If you look up here, I think we talked about this already, but just a reminder, if you see a whole number, so just the number 2, that means we are at bar 2, because that's the number 2, beat 1. If you see a number dot another number, that means, in this case, bar 2, beat 2. Okay, here's bar 2, beat 3, bar 2, beat 4, and then we're going to go to bar 3, because there are 4 beats in a bar. Now if I zoom in a little farther, we're going to see a note in between there. So now we have bar 2, beat 1, third 16th note. Okay, there are 4 16th notes possible. So 1, 2, 3, 4. That makes the third 16th note the halfway point. Okay, because this is beat 1 and beat 3. So the way Ableton does it is bar dot beat dot 16th note. Other programs might do something different. You might see a weirder number in the end, but almost all of them do bars dot beat and then either dot 16th note, or they might use a different timing mechanism for the last number. You can also look at this in terms of time. If we go down here, at the bottom we see time. 3 seconds, 3.5 seconds, 4 seconds, 4.5 seconds. Now these seconds, you might think, oh, that's what I want to see because that's more familiar to me. But it's actually much less useful, because what I really care about is where things are on the grid. The grid is the most important thing here, not so much the timing. Okay. We'll work more with this once we start building a beat, which we'll do in just a couple of videos, but first let's talk about the vertical axis.